thinking of you night and day. I've been afraid that you'd leave me, Daddy, leave me to go far away. Think of the day when we first met each other. You promised me that we'd be good pals forever. Dear, don't you leave me, it sure will grieve me. Don't go away to stay. Don't leave me, Daddy. Won't you tell me why you're leaving?
The Bellwether Dispatch, Week the 3rd, Part the 2nd. What it is, and what it is not, being the same thing. The old woman was yet 10 yards off, a grey moth in a hum of yellow light. Not only did she look 1,000 years old, but as though she'd been transported here from 1,000 years prior. Sarah Bellwether. It could only be her. "Is it you, Ronald?" she asked again, and for some reason, as I found myself so very close to saying yes, it occurred to me that I had a rather heavy stockpile of foul deeds accumulating in my personal backwater. Without any effort, I could compile a list of the terrible things I'd recently done, one after the other, but I could not summon any positive companion account. Why? What had happened was happening to me. I suppose I always imagined myself a hero in waiting, potentially legendary given the right circumstances, that I might leap into a pond after a car went crashing off a bridge to pull a whole family free from their sealed vehicle, that I might be the sort to catch a baby dropped from a burning building and break my arms in the act, that I could lead the revolution from a candlelit basement, writing great polemics that rallied the meek to our rebellion, cheeks striped with whip marks, as evil enforcers roved the streets. But I was not the broken-armed, baby-catching, family-rescuing, scar-faced, tract-writing leader of the rebellion. I was the yellow-bellied sapsucker who cowered and shirked and set fire to bears and ran and lied about it. And here I was in the subterranean laboratory with Sarah Bellwether and her candle, with a fresh chance to redeem myself. Why not tell her who I was? Why not confess? For I was, after all, still smoky from the fire, soot-faced and smouldering, and even more comically implicating who should be peeking out from my jacket pocket but the charred remains of friendly Geronimo Teddy. I was nothing if not the punchline to a cops and robbers cartoon panel, yet my scoundrel self was already roaring out the gate, for I understood that Sarah, possibly mad with age, did not know who I was. Second, I knew I could blow out her candle and make a run for it, and likely, even on crutches, make my getaway. So that was my wicked gambit. Grab the lit candle from the table, blow out hers, and hightail it. But then, of course, despite having access to a candle myself, my escape route remained a haze of possibility, and I didn't fancy crutching about in circles, searching for some tunnel to the surface, while enduring the lukewarm pursuit of the oldest woman on earth. Could I add a new element to my creatureliness, I wondered, and ask Sarah for directions to the exit, and then blow out her candle? Could I be that small? Oh, sad yes of how easily I could, and without a thread of dignity, decency, or any good thing, I said, "It is I, Ronald Vinegar. I have returned from whence I came." My evil twin crutch crept toward her. "And if you wouldn't mind," I said, "it's been quite some time since I set foot on the surface of this noble planet, and I should like to make my way there now, if you would be so kind as to point me to the exit." And though Sarah here seemed both to shrink and darken, even as her candle pulsed and brightened, she did not answer or even seem to hear my question. "I'll see it when I believe it," she said, shaking her head with a sleepy pleasure. "That's how it has always been for me. It took me so long to accept the idea, for how would you return, circling the drain of infinity as you were? It didn't make sense. And then even if you could come back, I thought, well, the only thing is that he'll crash. And then, of course, I realized that I am not the queen of that. I have no sense of facts or laws, so how could I have a fair theory of rockets or their landing? What I know has always been beyond fact and theory, that my trade, my soul, begins where all that ends, in trust and in belief. And just at this moment, as I sat in the by and by and cast for your latest dispatch, I found my way back, well, to my way. For I've always known that you would return for me, and I always believe first and see later. And with that, finally believing you would return, of course, at last and instantly, here you are before me, my dear, dear father. We were closer now, and I could feel the insect heat of my villainy as I began to draw my breath in and out, ever deeper, pumping my lungs for the bellows need of doing what I supposed might be the gravest and most insignificant crime of my life, that of blowing out an old woman's candle. Nothing alone compared to murder, but it was the very smallness of the act that made it so very pitch and grim and unforgivable. the way to the door. My dear, I said, dragging it out to forge my gentle innocence in the imperative of my need. But again she did not answer, and instead came closer. I balked and refigured. Was she possibly too old to answer questions? Was that a thing that happened, that there was an age beyond which small inquiries were too tedious for consideration, and so then ignored? Whatever that answer, it seemed clear I would have to make my own way out. I cargoed over the crutches, reached behind and grabbed the lit candle stub on the black tray, as Sarah placed the soft little hand of her head against my chest. I did not embrace her back, but rather leaned as I could and blew with all my might in the direction of her drop of fire. Whereupon, not very good at it, or too good at it, I managed to extinguish both our candles. And there we stood, in partial embrace, in a close and nearly perfect darkness. As I plotted some return to form, Sarah gripped me tighter. "Let me welcome you home first, Father," she whispered to my chest, and from the digging in of her arms, my crutches were pried away and clattered to the dirt on either side. And so, simply to remain standing, my hands had to take a rough grip of her shoulders, which she took as a loving touch, and so then held me even tighter, which in turn forced me to shift again, if only to remain standing, and so my arms had naturally to wrap themselves around her. "I know you are tired and injured, and we shall have you sit down soon, Father, to rest," she said. "But first I must hold you for some very long, unknown time. In fact, I don't know that I shall ever stop." At first I thought she might be laughing at this image of us standing together for some infinitely long embrace. But then I felt her shudder and shake, and realized she was weeping. And I suppose it was here that the strange unfolding of one thing into another began. For there is some arising instinctual business that cannot be denied, and it is nearly impossible for a weeping person to hold another and not infect them with their disorder. And as I stood there, still trying to piece together my escape, get the crutches, find some matches, light my candle, and get away, Sarah rather tore me off my roost and carried me down to the little home of herself, and our holding on became the mutual thing she meant it to be. And I found myself cradling over her and embracing her. I could make little sense of the tears in my eyes, and this again jarred so raggedly and furtively against the underlying truth that I felt some formerly rusted bit break off inside me and dissolve, and without any inner discussion I shifted certain permissions, and therewith the eerie reformation commenced, whereby I was no longer quite myself, but suddenly, in every ghostly way at least, in the starless mystery of the cottage, I was her father. This, then, our mutual perspective, that here was a father and a daughter holding each other in the underworld, finally met for the first time ever after 100 long years of never. Still holding me, Sarah brought a match out from her skirt and lit her candle. I motioned for my crutches, but she said she rather preferred to keep her arms around me. And so I slung one arm about her shoulder as she slipped one about my waist, and she hobbled me along through the cavern to a hatch-like door, and thereafter into the custody of a curiously round wooden room built into the side of the wall. Inside this circular room, she closed her eyes a moment, and her head trembled to a side, and of a sudden there rose a faint greenish light all around. There was a writing desk here, and another calligraph, and another wall board of blinky lights, and even stranger, a whole series of small port windows going round, which showed only the dirt beyond, and scattered thickly on the floor as a kind of blanket or carpet were hundreds of little green potted plants, which rustled against our ankles as we faltered along. She brought me to the table and sat me in a chair quite exactly the same as Ronald Vinegar's chair, above us somewhere in the mill. And for herself she fetched another and brought it beside mine, so that our chairs were touching, and then she took both of my hands in hers. "I will not ask of mother yet," she said, "nor why you waited so long to write again. I will linger in this moment until the shine of it has somewhat left me, for I don't wish any bit of gloom to darken what is for me the greatest moment of my life." She held my hands like this, and I held hers, until it seemed we must have both drifted off. But finally she roused me with a little kiss on the cheek, and I opened my eyes to see her standing near the hatch-like door. "I'll just go get my things, Father, and then we'll be off," she said. "Off," I muttered. "Off to where? Off in what? I doubt I could even get myself off the chair." She smiled and pulled the door shut behind her, and upon its closing I saw hanging from the door handle, a square plaque swinging from a length of chain, and upon the plaque, hand-painted in an almost unreadable calligraphy, were 2 words, Moonfellow 3. And beneath those words, beneath the little potted plants, beneath our 2 old touching chairs, I could hear the quaking rumble of some enormous engine slowly churning to life somewhere down in the earth below. Those curious about inaccurate weather reports, or eager to uncover a portion of the buried treasure of Amory Snow, or those who simply like postcards or subscribing to things that are free, may sign up by sending their name and address to bellwetherdispatch@gmail.com. If you would like only to see the postcard, make that intent known, and you will be given a secret address on the internet, which shall reveal it. Each postcard, real and virtual, will contain clues to a small pleasing treasure to be found somewhere in New Hampshire. A bag of doubloons is what the contents most resemble from the days of Amory Snow. Those finding the treasure are requested to take only a single sample of what is to be found, and to leave the rest for others. Finally, the only payment the town of Lemon requires is that you send photographic proof of your treasure finding, of yourself with the treasure at the secret treasure site, and that you send such images to bellwetherdispatch@gmail.com, that we here in Lemon might then proselytize in this manner, and achieve the great profit from multiplying 7 billion by the cost of stamps and subtracting that by a figure otherwise known as 0. Further information about the treasure hunt and postcards may be found at radioghost.com. Lastly, these rains of strong, strong bees. P.S. Infinity.